Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and people. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by a special guest. Everyone's a special guest to me, but I think this is another politician. I feel like I got a higher ed politician. I don't know. I just get all kinds of different industries on this podcast, which is dope. But I'm joined by another local politician, Renard Carlos. And so I met this gentleman. I actually know his twin brother more. We worked together at Mason, but I was very interested. We overlapped. We got to know each other, and I was very interested in his journey into local politics. And I was like, wow, I got to get you on the show. I got to ask about your experience, especially in the DMV, and how you're doing things. But before we get started, why don't you give the listeners a little introduction about who you are?
Sure. Well, Phil, thanks so much for the invitation and having me on the show. As we were talking about it before, congratulations on all of your success with the show. I think it's outstanding. So, Renard Carlos, I am a member of the Warrenton Town Council, which obviously is the governing body for the town of Warrenton. I'm a George Mason University alumni. So kind of the way I got started in local government, I went to George Mason, and I was a poli-sci major there, graduated from George Mason, and then had an opportunity to start working. And within my town, there was a local election coming up for the town council. And so I laugh with folks, but someone asked me, had you ever considered running? And so I think I still thought that I was a student at George Mason because I sent them this long email back on all the reasons that I thought adding, different perspectives on our local town council, all the positive things we could do, accomplish. And they said, well, it kind of seems like you get a lot of the answers. Why don't you run yourself? And I thought about it and I was like, well, yeah, why don't I run? So, yeah, that was 2018. I ran, I was my own campaign manager. When you're doing a local race, you're basically everybody. You're your communications team, your finance team, you're your publicist, you're everything. So, yeah, I did that and I was fortunate enough to actually win. And the term is for 4 years, so it's getting ready to expire coming up here. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started in local government.
That's crazy. You're from Warrenton?
Yes, originally from Warrenton.
So like go back to high school. Were you like getting involved in high school and SGA and all that? Or you just like take us back to that before
Well,
you
yeah,
went
that's
to college?
great. So I was actually homeschooled. So did homeschooling from kindergarten up until high school, graduated from my homeschooling program, and then wasn't exactly sure where I wanted to go to college yet. So then I got another opportunity to go to a boarding school. It's in Rome, Georgia, called Darlington School. Not sure if you're familiar with where Rome is. It's a small town, beautiful, but a really small town. That was an international boarding school. I did a year there, just getting a little bit more familiarized with and strengthening certain subject areas, your math, your science, things like that. Then I came back to Warrenton and went to Lord Fairfax Community College, did a 2-year degree there, and then transferred over to George Mason. But when I was doing Lord Fairfax Community College, yeah, I was still working in the town of Warrenton. And then even when I did George Mason, I was still, commuting back and forth to Warrenton. And so one of the things for me, yeah, I had followed local election, like people say politics, but to a certain degree, it's not necessarily as much politics as it is the governing, the governing body, what's happening, how's it affecting you locally. I had an opportunity to work at a few different locations in the town of Warrenton. One of them being, I think, probably like most folks, in the service industry. So I worked at a wine bar for a while. Then I worked at another bar for a little bit of time while I was doing my undergrad at George Mason. And so one of the things that you kind of got exposure to in that field was talking to the folks about kind of everyday, as they call it, kitchen table conversations, right? And so I remember having a lot of conversations with folks and hearing about certain things that the town was doing that you kind of scratch your head with and go, well, yeah, why are we doing it that way? And so there was this part that I was engaging with what was going on locally, what the town was doing at a governing level. But then it was a unique opportunity to work with local business owners and start to understand, okay, well, there's some disconnect here. Sign ordinances were a big deal at one point. We had like this atmosphere where it felt like the town would find a way to say no versus yes. And so if I'm a business owner and I'm investing my time, my money, my resources, well, we want to be a welcoming place to, have folks who are starting their business there. So you start looking at that, you start seeing, okay, here's some of the policy that maybe we could change. You couple that with having the everyday conversations with people, and then kind of over time, that's really how, I started kind of building my platform as, okay, well, if you were going to change this, what would you change? How would you do that? And then it's a unique experience because, as I say, it's real world. I think that's one of the things that's unique about local government. Like, so when you're in local government, you're not in DC somewhere. You're not going back home to see your constituents every 6 months or whatever. You're going to see your constituents at the gas station, or they're going to be at the grocery store, and you're going to see them. And it's everyday issues in local government. I laugh with folks because when I ran for our local city council, you're not able to run in a particular political party, right? And so in local government, it matters. Folks definitely have particular views, but the joke is I've never seen a Democrat or Republican pothole. They don't care. They just call me and say, "Hey, I've got a pothole on Main Street. We keep driving over it. Fix the streets." Or, "Hey, do you see the empty storefronts? Fill up the empty storefronts." And really, the Democrat or Republican, we don't care. They want you to go ahead and do, the immediate needs that they have. So that's kind of unique about local government. But again, that was kind of a passion started really, I guess, emerging because of those conversations that I was having with people, at the wine bar, at the photography studio. And it was just some everyday kitchen table ideas to say, yeah, why do we do it like A? It would be more efficient to do it like B, and bouncing those ideas off of them and having them provide feedback and say, yeah, that makes sense. So that's kind of, again, that really launched my campaign. So we put together a platform. Like, I just got out of George Mason. I think I had been out of Mason for maybe a year or two, and then just started putting some common sense ideas, and we ran for it, and we, like I said, we were fortunate enough to win.
So one of the things I'm hearing too in one of my questions is, as I've got more involved, I guess you call it local government rather than politics, is that I'm in Fairfax County, which is quite large compared to Warrenton, and they will do like these open calls to participate, particularly citizens, tune in or do your voice or come to a open town hall, and ain't no one come like, and then they complain, and I was like, I can totally be honest. I was one of those people until like I was most recently on a renaming task force, right? Like they were trying to rename Lee Highway, whatever, and they were doing listening sessions in libraries, they were doing surveys, they were doing all these things. And if you looked at the population of Fairfax County to the actual participants, it was like 0.01%. So can you speak to that level of actual people engagement? One, is it like that there when you go to a town hall meeting, it's like five people, the same five complaining? Or do you feel like there's particularly more engagement, scalability wise in Warrenton?
Well, it's a great question. So I think the way I would answer that, so you're going to find that I would assume that you're going to find that probably across the board, where folks, they're passionate to talk to you, or talk to their family members, or get on Facebook and complain about things. A little
Right.
less passionate about coming to the actual town council meetings or engaging with their local elected representative and expressing those issues to them. However, so representation was a really big deal for me when I ran, because of the fact that I felt like the myself as a constituent, right? I really didn't know who represented me. And like, if I don't have a relationship with you or I don't know who you are, I'm probably less likely to feel as if my voice really matters. And so, what I tried to do coming in was saying, hey, yeah, we can hopefully have folks come to the town hall meetings. We do something called citizens time. So at the very beginning of our town council meetings, they'll come out, they'll do citizens time, and they can share their views. But changing the mentality a little bit and saying, well, okay, if they're not coming here to us, why don't we go out there to them? Either if we're, prime example, when you're trying to win an election, right? You knock hundreds and hundreds of doors to, get your name out there to talk with constituents. Why does that change once you become an elected official? The same thing that got you there, you ought to be doing that same thing now as an elected official. So what I tried to do was saying, all right, well, if they're not coming into town hall, and you also got to think about it as well. There may be one side of the coin where there's a certain apathetic attitude as far as, well, my voice doesn't matter and town council is not going to care anyway. But the other side of it, and I do believe this, is that it can be a little bit intimidating. You're coming into this government building. You got, your elected representative are sitting at the dais here, and now your average Joe citizen coming to speak, in front of everybody. You got government officials and other folks who may be in the community, or for the same night or a different issue. That can be really intimidating. So instead of relying on, well, they know what time it is, they can show up. Well, why don't we kind of reinvent the wheel a little bit here, and let's start going out to them, either holding some community listening sessions, using technology. We started stream when I first came on council, and I'll preference this and say, so Warrenton's a small town, right? It's fantastic, um, but sometimes some of the things that make small towns um, very unique and very attractive as far as wanting to be here. It's quiet. You can kind of escape from a little bit of the hustle and bustle. Or also, it even feels like a best kept secret, if you would. Is also one of the things that can be damaging to small towns. Meaning, as we kind of get comfortable with doing, well, that's the way they've been doing it for 100 years, and we don't evolve the processes as we go along to make sure we're keeping up with the time. So to your original question, one of the things that I pushed us pretty hard on was trying to use technology to reach out to our constituents. Why don't we use social media? We've got this opportunity that if folks aren't coming to us, either we can go out to them, we can do some door knocking, we can hold some town hall community listening sessions, we can stream our meetings using social networks, using web internet applications where you're going to be able to show it just like TV. Like, why don't we do those things to kind of help get folks more engaged? And so that's kind of the approach that I took. I do feel like it definitely it helped. I feel like when constituents see that you're going not above and beyond, right? Because that's what we should be doing anyway, is finding ways to best communicate with our constituents. But they can see that. It's like, this guy, he's either walking the streets to come see me. She's sending me emails. He's live streaming the meetings. He's going, out of his way to make sure that I am informed as a citizen. That kind of starts to build that partnership, I feel like, and now I wouldn't say restores trust, but I think it builds a good working relationship where if there was a little bit of apathy towards government actually listening to the citizens, or if it was a little bit intimidating reaching out to your elected officials, the more we continue to do these types of things to engage with constituents, the easier it is to kind of get over those humps of maybe, going from just complaining about something to being upset about an issue and then taking it to your policymakers and then working with them to kind of correct that issue.
That's crazy. I mean, that's actually really interesting too, because I was about to say, like, this is totally a pivot, but in regards to how I feel like you're in the sticks. I'm making my assumptions about Warrenton.
Mm.
So is one of your things about regard across the states, like broadband access and internet, and making sure that that when you're utilizing these technologies, that it's all good signals out there. Is that been an issue or one of your platforms, or
Well,
Internet's pretty good out
for
there.
Warrenton, we're fortunate, so we don't have the struggles with broadband. But so we live in Warrenton, and we're part of Fauquier County.
Yeah.
But you know, if you drive out, 30, 45 minutes, it's different. Rappahannock County is a great example.
Yeah.
You get out to like Rappahannock County, um, then you start to really see it. Like, hey, why broadband is so important? Because like, good luck getting a cell phone reception, GPS. Like, you're not going to get it. But then, it's issues like that that kind of keep me passionate about doing what I'm doing. Because at times, while we certainly don't have that issue in Warrenton with the broadband access, you see it, right? It feels like,
Mhm. Mhm.
local government, these are the everyday problems. It's not just like broadband. Oh, here's an issue, broadband. Yeah, people may see it just as broadband, or the guys in Richmond may see it, and then gets one wrong up in the Washington. Yeah, it's broadband, but for us in local government, like no, it's Mrs. McGillicuddy down the street. It's not just a broadband issue. It's like you see the person that is actually
Yeah.
affected, and then you start to get it. Like this, it shouldn't just be an item on the list to check off to get done. No, because I know Mrs. McGillicuddy who has two sons, and they, can't get internet access to do their homework, and she, maybe is a single mom, and so she can't take off to, take them down to the library or whatnot. So then they suffer because they can't get broadband internet access. So you start to see those issues
Yeah.
really up close and personal, as a local representative. So like I said, yeah, we don't have that in Warrenton, but it's an issue that, like I said, you go 30 minutes outside of Warrenton, yeah, and you definitely start to see, some of those large issues that you hear about pretty frequently.
That's great. So, you studied poli sci, right? And that invoked it, and I think you say particularly you did it in 2018. And you said you graduated, right?
Yeah, so I graduated from George Mason. I think I graduated from Mason in 2016. I ran for council in 2018.
Okay, so when you were running, or just even like running during campaigning, and now actively, being an efficient, or being a government official, did you start like saying, "Oh my gosh, like this is a paper I wrote," or "Oh my goodness, this is something we studied," or "Oh my gosh, I'm I don't know, it's like things, like you actually taking what you learn in the classroom and making it applicable. Did that ever, like the light bulb ever like that go off for you?
No, absolutely. I mean, I remember taking a public policy class, and looking at policy, but looking at it kind of that local and state level. And no, there were definitely some opportunities. I think one of the things that I learned in my program at Mason was, from a policy perspective, is to think critically about policy, one that's in place, yeah, but then also, does this make sense? And if we are, the next generation of policymakers or elected officials, how would we improve on this structure, right? So I think for Mason, I'll give you a prime example. I remember being in a public policy class at Mason, and one of the things we were talking about, I think, was around student debt, right, and student loans. And I remember, so I was working at a local wine bar at the time, and I was going to school at the same time. And long story short, the wine bar changed ownership, and so when that happens, you lose your liquor license, all that. And so, no liquor license. If you're a wine bar, your food can be great, but nobody's coming just for the food, right? And
Yeah.
so suddenly, I found myself like, wow, I might be unemployed. Well, you get unemployment benefits and things like that, because I would have been laid off, and it wouldn't have been any fault of my own, right? And so I had the idea, like, no, I'm sure I can find work. Like, it's not that I don't need to be on this social safety net. I'm good. I'll find something. But as time went on, I couldn't find anything, right? So I said, wow, I guess I'm gonna have to go ahead and apply for unemployment benefits. And I remember trying to apply for them, and everything was going great, good to go. Last final things. One of the questions was, well, you know, what's your availability to work? And I was like, oh well, anytime except for ABC times, because I'm a college student and I'll be in class those times. And the person I was working with was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, you're not going to qualify for unemployment benefits. I was, well, why not? Well, because the way it's set up in the policy, you cannot uh, basically not be willing to work at a certain point in time. But because I was a college student, I wasn't able to work all the hours. I was limited in the hours that I could work because I was trying to get an education. So I remember saying, "Hey, is this call being recorded?" And they're like, "Yeah, it absolutely is." I said, "Okay, let me make sure I understand this." So my options are to either drop out of school so I can get on this unemployment social safety net here, or stay in school and try and find some alternative ways of making money, right? Yeah, basically. Well, if I drop out of school to get the unemployment benefits, then my chances of getting out of that, social
Cycle.
safety
Yeah.
net with
Yeah.
a limited amount of education, because then I probably wouldn't have been able to graduate, that's not a high likelihood of success. Or then if I'm going to try and stay in school and either find some different ways to make some money or take out more loans to be able to try and provide for there, that's also not setting you up for a long-term success. And so I remember talking to my classmates about that, and you know, some of them got it, some of them didn't. Some was like, "Oh yeah, he should just drop out of school for a little bit, and you should work and try and save some more money." Some of them was like, "Yeah, just take out more loans." But I was thinking like, guys, no, this does those none of those answers. I don't personally agree with any of them. What we should do is saying, "Hey, I understand this program, right? And it works well, but here's the particular area that it may not work the way it's structured to. What about college students? Have we factored them into the equation? And maybe we need to tweak that policy a little bit so we're setting college students up for success long term." And so taking kind of that pragmatic approach was something that I learned at Mason, but then even with my job now here in Warrenton, it is an opportunity to be like, yeah, absolutely. I understand how we've done things before. And it's not to say that the system is broken, but there's some things that we can do, especially you'll find this in small towns. There's some things that you can do to tweak the system a little bit better to put you in a better, to a certain degree, competitive advantage with other small towns and areas around you. Uh, I always tell folks, and you got to remember, folks have a choice. They don't have to choose to live in your town. We live, I've got Gainesville, that's, what, about 15 minutes away from me. I've got Culpeper another direction. People make the choice to live in your town. So you've got to, ask yourself as, as a governing body, are we putting ourselves in the best, position to be competitive with other jurisdictions? And that involves looking at your policy, looking at your codes to make sure that, your town is somewhere that's good for business. It's good for, for families. So yeah, I definitely would say that I had some real world experience, and I relied or fell back on what I learned at Mason. Absolutely.
So, who were, obviously, you and your brother homeschooling and all that, but who were some of your influencers or mentors or, advisors as you were going through the process? I didn't ask, did you, grow up in a family that was involved in politics and you had someone that, you looked up to that kind of modeled this for you? But can you speak to that?
Sure, yeah. So no, didn't really grow up in a house that was really, really involved, or we weren't sitting down watching CNN or Fox News on
Yeah,
every evening. I'll put it to you like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Now I'm a political nerd, so I like doing that now. But no, I didn't really have that. I think more so. So I was in the Boy Scout program, right? So coming
Mhm.
up, then the Boy Scout program, and I do tell folks that I think that definitely had a huge impact on my life and the way that I saw or see service. So,
Mhm.
I think I went in there, maybe you're like 13 or 14 or something like that. Usually the way that program worked is, you got your, older males who are the scout masters or whatnot,
Mhm.
and most of them have a lot of them have prior military experience or things like that, and you're going to the service academies, to on scout trips and all that. But really, what it does to a certain degree is, for some folks, at least it did for me, is kind of imprint this idea of service and being a servant leader to folks, right? Thinking, be pragmatic, and then hey, you've got this responsibility to lead and to show leadership, and if you know the answer, speak up if you would. And so I think that really started having a pretty big impact on me, the way I saw, you know, opportunities to serve in my community. and taking that, I got my Eagle Scout rank, but continuing to develop leadership skills. And I guess for me personally, I've just kind of been the guy that, like, if I know the answer, then I'm gonna go and roll up my sleeves and go do it. And having that attitude, and then seeing local government, and or even at the higher levels, just scratching your head, being like, why are you guys doing it this way? That doesn't make sense. And then taking that attitude and saying, well, all right, if it doesn't make sense, then why don't you go do something about it? Well, I don't, yeah, don't complain about it. Do something about it, and then understanding the channels to go about actually making real change and getting involved. So I tell you what, it's been interesting. Like I said, I've been coming up on my 4 years. Time has kind of flown by, but it's a learning curve too. I definitely think that you go in there, you definitely should understand that governing, campaigning and governing are two completely separate
Yeah,
things, and they should
yeah,
be, hopefully.
yeah. Like
Sometimes we see that doesn't really happen, but they should be. And so, servant lead, just having that mentality though, if you're going to be an elected official, it's about leadership and it's about service. And if that's kind of, at the core of who you are, then I think you'll do really well. And that's something that I feel really strongly about. So I think that kind of definitely influenced me. So I'd say if I had a mentor or a peer, it's definitely probably from some of the folks in the Scout program growing up, that I just had an opportunity. That I saw them taking their time to kind of give me some pointers and some advice. So in some ways, I feel like you ought to pay it back or pay it forward, because there've been so many people who have invested some of their time in me. All right, so now that they've done that for me, do I have time to do that to other people? And so for me, it feels like a no brainer. Yeah, absolutely, I can do that for other people.
I had a question. Very curious, and I don't really know this. At the local level, do y'all like, go still attend things in Richmond or talk about the whole state stuff, or do y'all get
Sure.
invited to that kind of stuff, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think we're really, really fortunate. So the legislator has done some redistricting, so we changed for a little bit. But so in Warrenton, the areas that we covered, we had Delegate Michael Weber, who covered Faulkner County, and then you also had Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, who had pieces of Faulkner County as well, and then Senator Jill Vogel covered Faulkner. Um, Absolutely, you'll see things that play out at the legislature in Richmond that then impact local governments. Like unfunded mandates are really big, right? Um, Understanding the big picture of what's trying to be accomplished, but then for us at a local level, saying, all right, I get what you're trying to do here, but hey, I've got a limited number of staff here, and how am I supposed to implement this project? That can be challenging. But then also, having I think we're fortunate, because I remember, Delegate Weber, he's been fantastic. Like, regular down to earth kind of guy. You call him up, hey, I've got this issue, and he's going to call you right back. Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, she was fantastic. I remember first meeting Delegate Guzman actually at an NAACP event right here, and I was, because she was, I believe, the first Latino woman, I think, elected to the legislature. I think. But I had followed some of her campaigning. I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's Delegate Guzman there, and she was just the most down to earth, type of person. Talk to you, hey, if you need anything, let me know. I think it's neat, the relationships that local elected officials, at least we've been blessed with that. I think here in Warrenton and Faulkner County, to have with our legislatures. She was fantastic. They've been fantastic. We had Denver Riegelman. He was our congressional representative for a while. Same type of person. You call him up, hey, yeah, what's going on? How can we help you? So I think there is a good, for us in the local government. Sometimes there's probably folks who aren't quite as fortunate, maybe, with some of their representatives. But I think we've been really fortunate in Warrenton and Faulkner County to have some just great elected officials working at in Richmond and in DC for us.
So have you gotten to go or gone to the capital of Richmond and gone to their
I
like
did some
gone to
there we
things?
did it with National League of Cities. I went to DC, so we went to the Hills to kind of advocate for certain issues that
Mhm.
affect local governments. So I've done a little bit of that, and that was a blast. But it's fun too, because again, it's just this. servant leadership type attitude. And so, you're coming from a small town, you're going to, Capitol Hill. That can be a little intimidating, right?
Mhm.
Talking with these legislators who represent, thousands of people, but then they're just down there folks as well, And again, I'm sure not everyone is like that, but again, we were fortunate to, work with some of our legislators, and it's done. Oh yeah, I know where Warrenton is, or Faulkner County. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's been fun. So yeah, I've done a little bit. Haven't been to Richmond yet for some reason.
That's good. So, I mean, we can't, we can't dance around. I mean, 4 years. Quick math. I think like 2 of those were pre-pandemic, and then 2 of those were during a pandemic, right, or close to it. So, can you talk about that experience, man? Like
Yeah.
going into politics pre-pandemic, and then going into politics and during the middle of your term, experience a global pandemic. Can we like talk about that? How did that experience go? Like,
Yeah,
wow, like, that's
you
crazy.
can't, you don't really
Feels
go
so
into
long
it.
ago.
I definitely didn't go into it thinking, hey, there's going to be a pandemic.
Yeah,
You say,
yeah.
hey, here's my 4 campaign platforms that I'm running on. I want to work with our technology. So let's talk about housing. You think this is what you're going to do, and then all of a sudden, hey, you're in the middle of a pandemic. So how do you change that? How do you structure that? So Warrenton was really unique, right? And this is kind of what I like about local government. So we've got this pandemic coming. There's, you got some mandates to come down where, if your local restaurants, you're not able to have folks in your restaurants anymore. Businesses are hurting. So kind of the mentality that we took was, okay, let's slow up here. Let's figure out what we need to do as far as keeping our town safe. Okay, feel like we're under control there. Let's figure out how do we keep these businesses open. Like, what do we need to do? And so, we, to a certain degree, said, we all have our certain platforms or things that we're working on, but this is kind of the most pressing need right now. So what we did, and it was really neat, just to give you one example. Um, well, we've got our main street, right? And so we got a bunch of restaurants on there. And so one of the ideas was, well, hey, let's do some parklets. And so what they did was, you take all your furniture and things like that outside the restaurants, and then it allowed folks, that when folks are starting to be able to come back together, and you could eat outside, and it was a little less. You didn't have to have your mask on, I think, to a certain degree, if you were outside in the outdoor area. That's something kind of creative that we did as a solution, and I mean, it was incredible to look at the results. There are a lot of the restaurants, and again, just ingenuity, right? And then local government getting together. We're not going to take 7 hours. It doesn't have to go through this legislator and this governing body. No, no, no. We're gonna get together. Let's figure out. Let's come up with a plan, and then let's implement it. Warrenton, some of our businesses did better than when they were not in the pandemic. So we came
Mhm.
out better in certain degrees out of the pandemic than in the very beginning when they started, because of the creativity that we did in governing. You had that. You had farmers market. Agriculture is incredibly important here in Faulkner County. You got our local farmers market. Well, what do you do about that? A little bit of engineering. Well, let's do a drive-through farmers market. Um, I don't think there are a whole lot of those around. We went ahead, pioneered it, did it, and I think other folks kind of started copying our efforts on that. So, it was interesting. I said, you certainly don't. I didn't go in thinking you're going to be in a pandemic. How do you govern like that? But, at the same time, it was a unique learning opportunity, right? To say, okay, well, you know, how do we prioritize? Have we been prioritizing, as efficiently as we should be? Hey, wait a minute. We were in a pandemic. We said, hey, all hands on deck. Let's zero in on this one thing. Keep folks safe, and let's keep our businesses alive. And the town of Warrenton did incredible. If we can do that in a pandemic, and we have that laser focus coming out of the pandemic, what do you think we could do when we zero in and really focus our efforts, similar to how we focused our efforts on the pandemic? So to a certain degree, I think it made us a little bit stronger. I'm sure it's not just us. I'm sure there's plenty of other folks in the state of Virginia who can probably have the exact same experience of zeroing in on an issue, not letting, some of the small stuff get in the way, and then not getting anything done, but saying, here's an idea. We may not love everything about it, but this is a good idea. Let's go with this, and let's give our businesses an opportunity to kind of stay competitive. Is something that I think is going to be. It was a unique learning experience, but I think you can kind of apply it to different areas of governing moving forward.
That's cool. What about so coming out there, ingenuity, and you're saying you're learning new things and you're implementing new things. What was one thing though, like not speaking of regrets, but what was one thing that was kind of lost or, you know, pre-pandemic? So for instance, let me give you an example. Like, um, jumping on Zoom calls and innovation is great, but there's still nothing like in person going to a
Mhm.
ball game, like that. So what was one thing, at the core of Warrenton that you still, need to hold on to, or that's kind of something that you're looking forward to going back to after this pandemic?
Well, yeah, it's good. The face-to-face communication. I say for me, one of the big reasons that I got involved and I ran was because I felt like there was this disconnect between the representatives and their constituents. And so, before the pandemic, I loved being out there. If it was, you're a teacher, you want me to come read your class for a little bit, or I'm over here at this event, or I'm meeting with, business leaders. That's really one of the core things that I really enjoyed about this job. And so that's certainly been something that I've missed and looking forward to going back, is being able to sit down, especially it's important if you are in a representative, right? There's certain things that are lost through emails or phone calls. It's
Mhm.
completely different to say, okay, Ms. McKillicuddy, I understand that you're upset about this issue. I tell you what, why don't we meet for a cup of coffee and let's sit down and let's talk about it. And that is a really unique experience. And from my experience, you know, I've had some issues for folks who are, they're pretty irritated. But once we sit down and have a conversation, we leave better than, and they say, well, thank you for the time. I get this. This makes more sense now that I've had an opportunity to sit down and talk with you about it, Ms. Carlson. No, it's fantastic. There's also been times when I've sat down with them and I leave saying, hey, no, I appreciate your time. You've actually helped me see this issue a little bit differently. Let me take this back to the drawing board and maybe come work on it a little bit differently. So that's something I'm looking forward to coming out of this thing, is being able to sit back down with a cup of coffee and just talk with your constituents.
So 4 years, that's quite some time. I feel like, it's ages ago. So what was one of your, favorite moments, so far? Obviously, I think you're saying you're running again or whatnot, but what was one of your just most fond memories or moments or
Yeah, it's a
proudest
it's a
moments
unique
in
one,
4 years?
man. One of the things that was really unique in the experience that I remember, and it's funny. Uh, Matt always jokes with me. He's like, "Hey, are you writing all these things down so you can do your memoirs later?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I know, I gotta do it." But so I remember um, doing the summer where we had you'd seen that with the stuff, things that had taken place with George Floyd, and you
Mhm.
had, you know, there were some folks who were, demonstrating peacefully, and there were other folks, they were upset, they were angry, and they were not as peaceful. Um, and so we got a notice that there was a group who were going to come and they were going to do a march through Warrenton. Now down the street in Manassas, they were having a really hard time, and it wasn't peaceful. And so we had just done, remember, the parklet. So you had all this stuff that was outside, loose things that if someone wants to do some damage, they could easily pick things up and do some real damage with them. Um, and so it was eerie. It was this sense of just like a feeling of like the calm before the storm. Like, is this going to be a peaceful thing? And so it was a unique experience. So I was also the vice president of the Faulkner County NAACP, and so we had known about it, and the young lady who was going to do it had reached out to us, and so I had said, hey, here's who I am. But is there any way I can help you? Facilitate this. Let's get together and chat about some of our concerns, and then also to kind of let you know what you're walking into as well, and just kind of have that dialogue. And so I was able to talk with her. And so I went back to my colleagues and, got I talked with her. I think, this is good. It's going to be peaceful. It's going to be exactly what it should be. And I don't believe it's going to be anything that it's not. But it was unique because, so I'm the youngest person on our town council. I'm the only person of color on there as well.
Mhm.
And it was a unique experience because, as all you got, some local business owners kind of like, preparing, hoping for the best, preparing for the worst. And that you got town council members out there kind of picking out some of the chairs and some things that were out on the main street that were loose. Again, saying, hopefully this is going to be totally peaceful, but if it's not, uh, let's try and mitigate any potential damages. We were getting reports that there were buses of people getting ready to come in and all this stuff. And I remember talking with one of my colleagues, and we were just talking about you know what we were seeing taking place across the country, and being able to see his perspective, and he was asking me what was my perspective, and just it was just a sense of camaraderie though about yeah, we want to do what's right for everybody, and how do we do that? And like, hey, we're the local governing body, like um this is it's very real right now. And it was just it felt like the you go watch the westerns where they're waiting for the showdown in the middle of the street. It felt like that, right? And you had I just remember being a younger person of color having a very candid conversation with one of my colleagues, right? And you had his perspective and his age, and then my perspective of my age, and his life experience and my life experience. And then, so long story, it was totally, the event was peaceful. It was everything that it should have been, and it was nothing that it should not have been. But it was this unique moment where I don't. It was unique because it was very raw and it was very real. And just to, you know, you sometimes when you're working on policy, you can lose sense of, hey, this is a person as well. He's my colleague, he's a person, he's got a family, he's got a wife, he's got a kid, she's got her family. But to be in that situation and just be like, you know, all this isn't time to debate policy or be upset because you voted this way. This is, hey, this is our town. We've got this responsibility to make sure we're protecting our citizens, and you know being ambassadors, if you would, to also listen to folks who want to come and want to do things the right way, and make sure that they're able to do that, and they are in a safe environment as well. So that was just a really unique experience. I remember one of one of quite a few unique experiences that I remember having as an elected official here.
That's crazy. I mean, that's very interesting, and I bet I do remember that too. Like, NAACP, like, okay, I want to speak up, and then going to protest, but at the same time, like, also making sure, like, protesting, but not also adding or inciting more violence and stuff like that. So, shout out to the NAACP. I did a car one during that time.
Oh, did you?
We had to, like, we were at the Fairfax County one, and we went to the Fairfax County government building, and we stayed in our cars, but like, so that no one got COVID. It was a very interesting time. And then we did another peaceful march at
Hmm.
Mason, and did the one on campus, and that was kind of weird too because it was like during like the very beginning of the pandemic, where like you thought like if you looked at someone you get COVID, but
Mm.
then you really like, it was a weird time because you wanted to be an advocate, you wanted to be out there in the streets marching, but then you're at the same time like, shouldn't we not be doing this because we're gonna get COVID? Like it
Yeah, it
was
was
just a
tough,
weird, it
man.
was a weird time, like you want to use your voice and advocate, but then like you don't want to get sick. It was just so that was I can picture what you're going like that moment in a small town. I can picture that too, like wanting to be vocal, wanting to be advocate for yourself, wanting to speak up, but also like that balance of like we're still in a global pandemic, and also we want to make sure that we don't you know incite more violence and cause more. It would have been it probably I think the cause would have got lost if violence would have been involved.
Well, and it was unique because, like I said, it was mostly a lot of young people who did that first walk, and I'm really proud of Warrenton because of the fact that we had several marches and they were all peaceful. They were all peaceful. It's like this is how it should be. I remember talking to one law enforcement officer at one because we had a few that were um, more so speaking to the George Floyd movement that was happening. But then you had another one where it was Asian Americans who were leading the
Yeah.
charge, and they were talking about discrimination that they experienced being an Asian American, and some of the things that they were saying I had never heard before. And so one of the comments that, and I won't forget it, the law enforcement officer, because we always made sure there's law enforcement was there to keep everybody safe, was that this is America at its best. It's about sharing your perspective in an environment where you can do that, and other folks can listen and learn and have an opportunity. Sometimes people sometimes people knowingly, do stuff, and sometimes people just don't know any better or just did not understand that's where you were coming from. But once you share your perspective with them, you know, that's when a seed is planted, and it's, oh, I had no idea. Thank you for sharing that with me. So it was Warrenton again is just this really unique place where, yeah, we've had marches, we've had folks, but they've always been peaceful, and it's provided this learning opportunity for to a small town, but with folks who have open minds to understand different perspectives and value those different voices who are bringing their life experiences and sharing that with the community. So it's a special place, man.
Now, one of my things I'm thinking about, and this is before we wrap up the show, is that
Sure.
we're learning more and more. As you said, uh, people are coming to Warrenton, they're smaller towns, and I don't know, they might be losing that small town feel. And the reason why I'm saying that is like, as the migration from large urban centers continue, people are moving further and further out. Building more and more property. I'm seeing way more homes and people. I can work. I can live in Gainesville. I can live further out and still work remotely. So, is there not say concern, but is there any like that feeling of like we're gonna lose the spirit of Warrenton as the world becomes more global and people are moving further out? Is there any sense like that,
Yeah,
particularly as a local politician too?
yeah, no, you're 100% right. You don't want to sacrifice your small town charm, right, to just unstructured growth. So one of the things that we've done here in Warrenton is have the conversation regarding growth, but it's smart growth. It means, hey, just because I would do like this. If a developer wants to come and build in Warrenton, well, I think it's fantastic because that means he or she sees the value in Warrenton, and they want to invest their time, money, and resources here. But it's a working partnership, or should be, because I need to know that what they're building is reflective of what my constituents are looking for, in their town. If you want to build a 16-story apartment complex in the heart of Warrenton, that's not going to work. But
Mhm.
so it's part of having that conversation with your constituents and as a governing body to make sure that we understand long term what does smart growth look like for Warrenton. Do we have housing? Housing is a big one. Do we have housing that's number one reflective of the current jobs that we have? It's also reflective of the future jobs that we want to see. Meaning, hey, what industry are we looking to bring to Warrenton, and do we have jobs that would support those industries? Um, and is that aligning with our estimated growth rate or what we've said we want to see our growth rate be? Those are kind of the policy um, conversations that keep you from just the sprawl that your constituents will call you at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, we don't want any urban sprawl here, but I get it.
Yeah.
Smart growth, and here's how we're going to achieve smart growth through those particular policies.
I love it. All right. Well, this is the part of the show I call Shot for Shot. You get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you any random question. You want to go first? I go first.
Sure, go first, man.
Oh man. Okay. So if you were to do a campaign tour across the country, right? Like you're still a local Warrenton guy, but you wanted to go to like 3 or 4 cities across the country to speak praises about Warrenton. What 3 or 4 cities would you want to hit on and speak the praises of Warrenton and why? Just curious.
I don't know, man. That's a hard one. Yeah, I don't know specifically what cities I would go to, but uh, I mean, I know what my pitch would be. I know
Okay, there you go. I like that. Yeah,
the
do your
pitch
pitch
would
then.
absolutely be, hey, where I would probably go to larger cities, and here's why I would probably do
Mhm.
that. Love large cities, fantastic. Nothing against large cities, but sometimes it's nice to be able to go on a main street, get a cup of coffee, and read a book, and it's completely quiet outside, or you don't have to look like, oh, I'm kind of looking over my shoulder. There's so many people around me. Nope, you can just kind of relax, get a cup of coffee, sit out. You're not looking over your shoulder. Maybe you'll see 2 or 3 people there, but that's a big change sometimes versus being in a very large city where it's very much hustle and bustle and very busy, or being in a small town where if someone walks by, you say, "Hey, how are you doing?" and they might say, "Hey, how are you doing back?" It's just a slower atmosphere sometimes. I think that'd be really refreshing for someone who wants to escape the hustle and bustle of the city. So that's my plug. Come to Warrenton.
There you go. I love it. I'm actually might have to come out there, come out to Warrenton. I've been out there a long time ago, but I haven't been there in a while. Okay, what's your question for me?
Okay, let me see. Phil. All right. So I believe you're in higher ed.
Yeah.
If you were not in higher ed, what career path would you have taken?
Snap. Okay. So would it be like with my brain right now, or if I was in college and had to do it over again?
Okay, how about if you're in college and had to do everything all over again?
All right. So if I was in college and had to do it over again, and knowing the knowledge that I like now, and knowing that I'm doing media right now, I told someone the other day I still would have studied history, but I would have added a digital media component to it. And I think it would have been dope to either do like documentaries, like record, make documentaries,
Mhm.
and learn a little bit of film techniques, or I would have done this like audio archiving and interviewing people. And I still would have combined my love of history and asking questions and learning about the past, but I would have really invested earlier in some kind of like digital literacy. Like I would have learned how to do audio editing earlier, or video
Okay.
editing, or would have learned how to do video editing, because I'm like, I love it now and I still love history. I just think it would have been cool to like travel the world and do interviews. Like one of my dreams, one day if I was like, could just leave it all, well, not take my family with me, would be like Anthony Bourdain. You know what I'm saying? Like just eat good food, drive, go around the country, asking people questions, record it, and be a show like that. So that's what I would have done. I would have still studied history. I think I just would have added a media component and became like a famous person on TV.
Hey man, hey, it's never too late, man. You're famous now, man. Come on, you
No,
got the Phil show. Come on.
I'm hood famous, man. They only know me in Virginia. They only know me. They only know me in the 703 and very barely in the 703. You know what I'm saying? But it would have been. It still would have been. Yeah. So I'm playing catch up now. I still like to use media, and I still like to ask stories like you. This is kind of like archiving in my own. This is history right here. So I feel like I get to play it out on a low scale.
I think it's awesome, man. Well, look, when you blow up and you're famous, and I see you on the History Channel and whatnot. Hey, remember the small towns and bring your show to Warrenton.
Yeah, I would definitely do that. Like literally on the show, you'll take me to all the spots. We'll drink coffee, but you'll tell me like this is the restaurant. Like he does that. Like, this is the restaurant you got to go to. This is the diner you got to go to. Like I'd go to like the local spots that you got to eat.
Oh yeah,
that'd be dope. All right, well, this is great. I was really excited about this podcast. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about you. And I learned a little bit more about local politics, which was always what I love about this show, is I get to learn something new from my guests. So this is the part of the show. It's called shout outs and plugs. So shout out, you get to show love to anyone you want to show love to. Make sure you show love to the right people. When you share this episode, they'll be like, I didn't hear my name.
Right.
And then plugs, anything that you want the listeners to be aware of, whether it's your social media channels, way to follow up with you, websites, anything that I'll make sure to put in the show notes. So this is the part for you. Shout outs and plugs.
Sure. So shout out, easy one. Shout out to my wife, Leah Carlos. Any good elected official, I would assume if they've got a team or a staff that, there's always a team or a staff probably helping them. It's not just them. And so my wife has been my team or my staff. She was my only campaign volunteer, and I didn't even pay her. So, but she's been a fantastic support for the past 4 years. So always huge shout out to her. For any of your guests, one of my things that I believe in is collaboration. There's no reason to sometimes reinvent the wheel. I'm working on some housing initiatives now here in the town of Warrenton. So if you've got some ideas, or some of your listeners have some ideas on housing collaboration, love to reach out to them, or just in general, always looking for opportunities to kind of share my life experience with folks, and in turn hear their life experience. So always looking for different ways to collaborate with folks.
And so you can find you on LinkedIn and whatever, right?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook at Renard Carlos, Warrenton Town Council member. You can find me on Instagram. Council member Carlos on Instagram, and you can find me on Twitter at Renard Carlos, Warrenton Town Council member as well.
There you go. I'll put all that and connect with him, collab. Shout out to the Mason alum. So this has been great. Thank you so much for joining the show. I really learned a lot. Positive Filter listeners, if you took any value from this episode, please share it with your family members or friends. Sharing this podcast helps, grow the podcast as well as get, people to learn new things, which I'm really excited about. If you have a question for the podcast or want to leave a voicemail for the podcast, the number is 571-336-6560. That's 571-336-6560. Sometimes I put those voicemails on my podcast, and that's dope. Follow Positive Filter on all the channels. Leave a like or a review or a rating on iTunes. That helps elevate it. And thank you so much for listening, and we're out. Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.